And we thought we'd start you off with with at least a little bit of humor. Some of you may have seen this before, but Beth, someone sent this off to Beth. Oh yeah. Yes, yes, it would. So, and we've probably had this experience in our own lives before, where you're some selfless act, and you sort of get some of this, and every now and then we get a little discouraged, and we think, why am I trying? Why am I doing this? And I get this sort of feedback, but that's still press on, still continue to do those selfless acts. Ignore the people in the crowd asking if it's mercury free. Tell them, no, there is mercury in this fish, and you will enjoy it. Okay, maybe not.
Okay, so today we're going to just kind of reflect and think about what this story, what we can learn from this. And as we were doing our research, we came around with a lot of information. And I was just telling Joan, I found a reflection, and I can't say this guy's name. It is Marcelino D'Ambrosio, and he is the director of CrossroadsInitiative.com. It's one of the world's leading Catholic websites, and he has a reflection on this. And instead of taking it and putting it in my own words, I told Steve, I said, we don't always have time to sit down and read abundantly about the topics that, are pertinent to us or that we want to read about. And so I'm just going to share this reflection from Marcelino. Okay. He says, only one miracle of Jesus is recorded in all four Gospels, the multiplication of the loaves and fishes. He says, I once heard a homilist give what he said was the real meaning of the story. The people in the crowd took out food they were hiding under their cloaks and shared it. Jesus' preaching inspired the melting of selfishness, and this was the true miracle according to this pastor. My kids would call this such preaching hopelessly lame. This was a needy crowd. They could not feed themselves or each other. They could not heal themselves or each other. Jesus was moved with pity and was ready to provide them all that they needed. The apostles wanted to send them away to fend for themselves. And this hits upon the grain of truth contained in the lame interpretation we just mentioned. Though this story is about a truly supernatural, miraculous action, it is not about God creating something out of nothing. He says to the apostles, you give them something to eat yourselves. He had to be joking. They must have thought to themselves. They had nothing or almost nothing. Just 5 loaves and 2 fish, scarcely enough to serve as an appetizer for themselves, never mind the crowd. But the apostles sheepishly complied. Jesus ordered that they surrender their scanty food supply. He blessed this meager offering, and the miracle happened. It was not only enough, but after thousands had eaten their fill, there was more left over than what they'd started with in the first place. It never ceases to amaze me how much energy we put into making excuses. I don't even earn enough to feed my own family. How can I be expected to give? I haven't studied the faith enough to be a religious education teacher. Yes, you have. I trip over my words when I try to explain my faith. I'll just evangelize through good example. Our financial resources, talents, and holiness are clearly inadequate to meet the needs of a hungry and confused world. But what else is new? This gospel commands us to offer these resources anyway, trusting that He will multiply them. Who could have guessed how God would multiply the loaves and fishes offered by an Albanian nun named Teresa when she walked into the slums of Calcutta? Imagine if she had said, no, Lord, this is beyond me. Imagine if Peter had not reconsidered after saying, leave me, Lord, for I am a sinful man." Imagine if the apostles had saved the 5 loaves and fish for themselves instead of wasting them on a crowd that wouldn't have been satisfied with them anyway. But you may protest. Isn't this miracle story about the Eucharist? Absolutely. In the Eucharist, we bring the very ordinary work of our hands, bread and wine, to join to this offering of our very ordinary lives. Through the invocation of the Spirit and the Word of God, this offering is transformed into the body and blood of Christ, the bread of life and the cup of eternal salvation. We offer him the work of our hands and our broken humanity, and he transforms these things into perfect humanity and life-giving divinity. And with this, he not only feeds us, but empowers us to feed the whole world. This transformation, this multiplication, is a supernatural marvel that is the source of other marvels. In fact, if we unpack just a fraction more of the miraculous power contained in the Eucharist, we, the Church and the world, would be forever different.
So we're going to show you one other video. It's a video, it's the same story. It's just a slightly humorous discussion of it. And it comes from, we found the video. I'm going to stop it. So I like this clip. Didn't want to show you the whole thing. The guy, it's a great. This part of his story is really good. It's humorous. But what I like most about this is how he ties it back to us today, how we would behave, how we would act today. And I think about if Jesus said some of these things to me. What? You want me to what? Say, tell them, hand it out. Same sort of reaction. And we have that, and that's one of the things that we hope that you guys take away from the story. We've read the story, we've done a skit with the story, we saw a video of someone telling the story, and it's basically the same story. There are many versions as we read in the gospel, but the story is basically the same. It's the same story, and how do we take that and how do we apply that to our lives today? And that's the real challenge. It's easy to think, oh, well, this happened a long time ago, things were different. Well, things are different, but how are things the same? How can we apply these today? One of the stories that, when we were doing our research, Beth came across a story about a guy that went on a fishing trip and how the fishing trip changed his life. And she said to me, you know what, you should tell a fishing story. And I'm not a fisherman. But I am going to tell you a fishing story today. So, we were just talking a minute ago about Boy Scouts, and every time that we've gotten up here and done a presentation, somehow it ties back to Boy Scouts. Strickland and I are both very involved in scouting. Fantastic program. If your boys aren't in it, get them in it. There's my plug for the Boy Scouts. So I want to tell you about a trip that we went on this summer. We went to, where did we go? We went to Canada, that's right. So we went to Northern Tier, and Boy Scouts has several high adventure camps. And actually, I'm going to back up a little bit. I was reading a book yesterday with a friend. We were going over the greatest hikes in the world, and it was a whole book about all these hikes that you could do, and it would rank. There was a little scale. It said physical challenge and psychological challenge, and I never realized that until we went to Northern Tier. And there is a physical challenge for everything that we do in our lives, and there is a psychological challenge. So 2 years ago, maybe many of you have done this. Some of the boys have definitely done this, and dads, some of you have probably done this when you were boys, and that is Philmont Scout Ranch. Philmont, our crew went on about an 80-mile backpacking trip, 80 miles through New Mexico. Fantastic 12-day trip. Wonderful. So going to Northern Tier is different. It's all about canoeing in Canada. And there are three places that you can go in Canada for Northern Tier. There is Ely, Minnesota, which, if you hear the people up there talk about it, they compare Ely to a superhighway. We live in Houston, so we all have been on a superhighway before. Has anyone ever been on the superhighway alone? No, and you won't. So Ely is kind of like the superhighway of canoeing. You get out there, you see people. There's a crew over there. There's a crew over there. Campsite there. People here. And then there's another base that's called Atacocan. Atacocan is further north, and Atacocan was compared to a country road. Country road. How many of you have been on country road? Yes, good. All right, this is the participation. I expect that all of you have been on a country road before, so good job. So you've all been on a country road, and you'll drive along for a while, and you might see someone, you might not see someone, but wow, it's been 30. Oh, cool. There goes a car. I saw someone. Good. It has not been the end of the world. People are still around, and a few minutes later, another car. So you know that you're not alone. Every now and then you'll pass through a little town. If you're in Texas, there will be the Dairy Queen there, so you can stop and get some ice cream if you need it. So that's Atacocan, the country road. And then there's Bassett, which is the base that we chose to go to, which was described like camping on the surface of the moon. Nobody is there. Nobody is there. So for 9 days, we were out in the wilderness and saw nobody. Actually, at a great distance, about a mile away, we saw a boat, a single boat off in the distance, going across the lake. So when we got to Bassett, we jumped on an airplane, a pontoon plane, and the airplane took off and it dropped us out in the middle of nowhere on a lake. We got in canoes, we took off, and we were out in the water for 9 days. I take that back. We were not alone. We were accompanied by every mosquito on the planet. So if you ever hear someone say, "Oh my gosh, there were hundreds of mosquitoes," we would beg for only hundreds of mosquitoes. There were hundreds of millions of mosquitoes. So anyway, like Jesus, and we were sort of looking for some quiet time. We were out there looking for some quiet time, and we were in Scout Lake, or what's the name of right outside of Bassett? I forget the name of all the lakes. Sacacanikum, is that the park? No? All right, that's not the park. I don't remember the name of the park. I believe it's Sacacanikum. Strickland says I'm wrong, but y'all can look it up later. So anyway, we're out there, and this is some of the greatest fishing on the planet, supposedly. This is where walleye, pike, all sorts of fantastic fishing. So before we got on our float plane and they dropped us off, we went to Academy, or whatever outdoor place they have in Canada, in Winnipeg, and we bought every sort of fishing stuff. We got all kinds of stuff. We were loaded, we were decked, we were ready to go. Day one, no fish. Dried eggs, some pepperoni, a little bit of bread, no eggs. Oh wait, dried eggs, dried milk. Day two, no fish. Day three, no fish. Day four, no fish. Where are all the fish? We are the worst fishermen on the planet to date. We are in the greatest, most infested pike and walleye waters in the world, and we cannot catch anything. Well, finally, we come to a point in our trip where we're getting a little desperate. Not because we don't have food, because we do have food. We would just like to have some fresh food. And believe it or not, the fish start biting. And they're biting and they're biting. And all of a sudden, there were 12 of us out there in the middle of nowhere. We brought 4 poles, so we all sort of rotated through. There's not enough fishing gear for everyone to use. So we start rotating the poles, the fish are coming in, and all of a sudden, we have a bounty of fish to eat. We started with very little. We had our loaves, we had our fishes, but we were able to make more out of little. It was a very quiet time, and it was one of the greatest meals that we ate. The fish were full of bones. They were probably undercooked. I'm sure it was terrible. If you'd been in a restaurant and ordered it, you probably would have left no tip and complained about the quality of the food. But it was the greatest fish we ever ate because we caught it, fried it, we cleaned it, and we survived. We continued. We persevered. We had our quiet time. We moved on. Not that much different. We did not have to feed 20,000 people, fortunately, but we did have to feed 12. And so with the fish that we were supplied, the fish that showed up, we were able to do that. And unfortunately, again, we continued our trip, and our luck in fishing also continued, meaning not much. We had one good day, but that one good day was a fantastic day. So that's one of the things that is my one fishing story. Now, how do we tie this back to the story of the fishes and loaves? Well, I'm not sure. Give me a minute, and I'll think of something good. No, how do we tie this back? In our lives, there are challenges. We have to have faith. We have to make much out of little, and that's what this story is about, and that's what we want to do. So think about your life, think about what you've done, and think about how those things can be applicable within your life as well. So in your handout, in the adult section, it looks like the adult section, section 1, there's a little reflection in discussion number 1, and then there are 3 questions. What we'd like for you guys to do is, as a table, break up into some, let's, read the paragraph, think about the story, relish in my awesome fishing story, because I know y'all were enthralled. That was a good one, wasn't it? That was a keeper. You can use it if you need to in the future. Anyway, read this stuff, discuss the 3 questions amongst yourselves. We'll come back in a couple of minutes. What we have been given, how do we offer that to God, and what makes this easier, what makes this difficult? So in our story, who did the giving? Who is the offerer? Who had the gifts to share? Now that the kids are gone, I only have a couple of adults willing to. Who was it? I heard someone say, yeah, it was the little boy, that gave the fishes and the loaves. So let's tie that to us. What were some of your discussions about those things? Any table want to share? Easy, guys, easy. I can tell we're going to have to go by raising of hands. So, anyone? All right, thank you. I'll come over here.
I don't know about you all, but something we struggle with our family is time, time, time. We are constantly running. We are constantly behind the 8 ball. And I think that this story and taking this time for reflection resonated with our family that we do need to make more priority in terms of giving back. I felt that the stories about the meals that some of the families gave here really resonated with us, that we do need to take more time to give back. So that's one of the gifts that we have that we're kind of always grappling with, and we need to make these things more of a priority to give them back. Because more than these kinds of things, just taking time to slow down and reflecting about how much we have and how grateful we should be can really benefit us going forward.
Thanks. Yeah, sometimes our time is the most valuable thing that we have. It's the hardest thing to give up. We can make more money. It's easy to give money away. Sometimes it's much more challenging to give your time away. Anyone else? Any other groups? High school kids, be ready. Eventually, I'm going to make my way to that table, whether you raise your hand or not. So just be ready.
One thing that was brought up is the difficulty it is to get outside of your comfort zone. We all recognize our primary vocations as spouses and parents, and that is our primary focus. But it's easy to get locked in. And anytime you're turning towards yourself, you're kind of turning away from God. And so to force yourself and your family to help out with these service projects and anywhere where you're seeing need, you're really kind of broadening your scope and helping yourself out, because you realize, we got it bad with X, Y, and Z. These things are really bad, but wow, those folks have it much worse. And thank you, Lord, for there, but for the grace of God go I.
Great, thank you. Anyone else? What are the challenges? What did anyone talk about a unique or a different or an unsuspecting sort of talent or gift that we should share? We think of time, money, food. Anyone come up with any interesting, different, unique? Oh, look at this! Wow.
So we didn't. Nobody at our table immediately had something big. So the leaders asked us like, "What is a small thing?" And I had figured out in middle school, particularly when I'm helping out at shelters, I can fold a fitted sheet, and that's really useful.
Folding fitted sheets. That's a talent, and it's a talent worth sharing.
It was cool because I was telling her that's really important at somewhere where they don't have much space, and working at another shelter makes everything much easier to see. So it was a valuable talent in that circumstance.
Absolutely. Perfect example. Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Our third question is something about. So let me see. I'll look over your shoulder here. With our families, how is the phrase "less is more" applicable? Wow, I love the phrase "less is more." When I was a kid, and many of the adults will probably remember this, there was a commercial on TV. It was a Miller Lite commercial. I'll think for a minute. Everything you ever wanted in a beer and less. Wow. When I was a kid, I had no idea what that meant, because how on earth could you give me everything that I ever wanted and less? How could that possibly be a good thing? It wasn't until I got older that I understood the concept of dieting or fewer calories that I realized that less, in this case, was actually more. They were talking about calories and losing weight, and so whenever I think of "less is more," I always think of that Miller commercial, which is maybe a bad example, but it's where I go. A similar place that I go is when I started racing, road racing in automobiles. The concept of you have to go slower in order to go faster. You got to go slow in this corner in order to go faster here. You have to give and take. You have to work it. You have to. Less is more. So, what were some of your discussions? Those are just sort of anecdotes for how to describe less is more. Not really a story of how giving less is more. Any good topics from your tables, your groups there? Come on. Thank you.
We talked about how our one of the things our kids tend to look in our pantries and our refrigerators, and even though we have an abundance of food, they say that there's nothing to eat, and how they really don't truly understand being hungry or going without. So the fact that we tend to have so much, whether it's food in our pantries or electronics devices, stuff like that in our house, um, they seem to feel that they don't have enough, or there's not enough, or maybe if they didn't have all of this stuff at their fingertips, like maybe some of us didn't have growing up, or those who are less fortunate than us, they would appreciate what they do have more. And that goes for all of us, adults.
Yes, a great example there. As you were telling that story of the electronics, it takes me back to. Sorry, forgive me. It takes me back to Boy Scouts again. The boys don't take electronics, so when your children are at your home, it's at least for mine. There have been waves, depending on their age, where you couldn't get them away from the DS or the Xbox or the Wii or the whatever that electronic device was, or just the television in general. Getting out, going camping, when we do things like that, out in nature, out in the woods, they don't have their phones or their electronics or their video games or just a television. And having less, not having those things, we the adults who are watching the boys, we can see that they're having such a great experience, so much fun. The good old get out and play, to unplug and get outside and go somewhere. The less, the no electronics, the no video, the no computer. Getting out there is so much more. Very, very simple. Thanks. Out of time? That says I'm out of time. Oh, I have one more thing. All right. And then I'll be out of time, is what she's saying. All right, so today's gospel, we're told that Jesus took the loaves, he blessed them, he broke them, and he gave them. So those are the, I'm going to actually even back up a few. This is something that was from the family session that we didn't. Oh, yeah, there's that. Take, bless, break, and give. So we're called to take, bless, break, and give. To take is to recognize God's blessings in our lives. When we own the gifts that we've been given, we are led to bless God, to thank God for our gifts. So the first of the two verbs calls us to take and bless. What do we have to be thankful for? Many things. Our health, time, family, friends, talents, abilities, of course our faith. All of these things are gifts and blessings. We must not walk through life in a daze, ignorant of what we have been given. We must recognize our gifts, and we must take them and bless God who has given them to us. So first we take and bless, but that's not enough. The gifts for which we are thankful must also be given, the last verb. But before we can give, we must break. The image, the mental image that comes to us is from the breaking of bread. Before bread can be given to others, it must be broken, because no one can eat a whole loaf at once. Well, most people can't eat a whole loaf at once. In the same way, the gifts that we want to give to one another must be broken so that they are accessible. They must be broken so that they can be received easily to those that we choose to give them to those that we share with. We might truly love others, but if we don't have the words, if we don't have the patience, if we don't have the strength to tell others of that love, then our love can never be given or received. So the first step for each of us, before we can give, is to make sure that we allow our gifts to be accessible. Make your gifts accessible. That means we need to break in ourselves anything that hinders the giving of our gift. We need to break ourselves by being willing to change whatever is necessary to allow the giving to happen. For some of us, we must change by being more aggressive. Others will need to be more humble or quiet. Some of us have to speak louder. That wouldn't be me. Mine would be the other one, which would be speak more softly. Whatever change is required to allow our gifts to be given, we must enact it. Unless our gifts are accessible to others and freely offered, the giving will not have an effect. So the four verbs used to describe Jesus in today's gospel are meant to remind us that the Eucharist is more than the miraculous change of the bread into wine. It calls for a change in us. The Eucharist offers each one of us a pattern of living. We must take the gifts that are given and thank God for them. We must break anything that hinders us from giving the gifts to others. Take, bless, break, give. These are the four verbs that describe Jesus' institution of the Eucharist. These are the four verbs we use every time we come together to celebrate the Mass. These are the four actions on which we must pattern our lives always. Thank you. All right, if we could please stand. Before we say our prayer, are there any intentions?